Today is all about site and lot inspections on building modular. Last week, we were at a 300-acre site looking at this, and we have some video. And we said we're going to try and do those videos. I'm trying to go fast. That way, hopefully the sound comes through, but not on all the videos.
Yeah, exactly. So the catchphrase for today is know before you go. So if you're already sold on offsite construction, if you're already going down the road of volumetric modular construction, you just need to make sure that you can get there. And it's two things that you're looking for. The property itself, where the modules are going, can you get in there and can you set those modules there? And access points. How are you going to get there from the factory? What's the route off of the major highways? So it's really two things that you're looking for, the actual site and also the approach to the site.
It is, and it's so important. So, hey, the phone rings, a developer calls you, said, hey, I want to build this huge building in downtown Chicago, or,
Arizona.
for in this case, out in the middle of nowhere, New York. And I don't mean it as middle of nowhere, but, in a very rural area. The concept of what we're going to talk about and the process of what we're going to talk about today is all the same. We're going to have some video to show you this. We're going to have some walkthroughs and some photos to make it through this. But, it's so important to get to the point, well, all right, you want to build modular, but is modular right for you in this project? Right. Because there are some locations you're just not getting to. Well, you can get to all locations, but there's a cost involved. And I think that's where you got to draw the line and understand what we're going to talk about in detail today.
Right. So this is all part of the feasibility studies that happen at the very beginning. And again, from a design and planning perspective, you want to identify modular construction as an option very early on and design into the process. So that's what we did. We got out and we went to the site. So how about we start? Yeah,
let's do it. Anthony Goudet, let's get to it. Site, you in a rush today, Anthony?
Well, we're late.
We are late. Sorry. Throw me under the bus, would you? So we are late. All right, Jennifer. So I got multiple computers working today.
Oh my God.
Let's hop into what we have here. Can we get to where we're going is the title. So what is the first thing, Jennifer, that we're looking at?
Yeah, so really from the factory, the highways, right? The highway from the factory nearest to your location, that's where we're starting.
Yeah.
So again, regionally, everything is different. We speak a lot to the Northeast. We'd love to hear from you if you're in different parts of the country and tell us where you're starting and where you're, how you're looking at this, because it could be different regionally.
Yeah.
But typically we start at the first major highway.
Yeah, for sure. And you can see here, and let's see if I can get this to,
Told you we were playing with multimedia today.
What happened there? Yeah. Give me 1 second, everybody. Sorry. Back to it. Here we are.
There we go. Looking
all right. So you can see coming down the highway here, right? I mean, there's a lot going on. Look at that car crossing the yellow lines to get around. These are wide loads. There's telephone and electrical lines overhead. And then you get onto the local roads. And you can see on a single lane road how much this actually takes up, right, when a truck is going. And I think, bugger. And I think what's important with all this and understanding all this is when you're driving a route, pretty much the rule is from off of any major highway, you need to be checking that route. Absolutely. And if you don't understand how to do all of that, well, then you need to get some help. As you can see, there's flag cars in this. You can see the trucks coming down the road. The flag car in the front actually has big poles on top to catch. You can see the poles on the front of that van to actually hit the wires or to warn them that, hey, something is too low as we're driving in. So this is just a great video to give everybody an understanding of really how big these are and how many units could be coming down the road. And these really aren't even long units that we have here.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, when we talk about the modules that we're working with, our super wides can be 15, 16 feet wide once you get it onto that truck. And in terms of height, I mean, you're up there. We have a lot of low bridges where we are. And that's a major concern. So you need to be on the lookout for that.
And it's different for every area. And New England's an older infrastructure. So getting around in New England, we have lower bridges versus going to the Carolinas or outside of Atlanta or some of these other areas where bridges are 18 feet high, or, you know, and you can take 20-foot modules down the highway. So it all depends on your area and where exactly you are building at.
Yeah, and it's not to say that you can't do it. You just might need to modify the size of the modules that you're bringing in. Yeah. So perhaps instead of doing one really long module, you may want to consider 2 modules.
That's right.
So there are ways to make it happen, you know, so just think creatively. And as Dave was saying, this is where you really need to reach out to your partners. If you haven't done this before, really reach out to your set crew, your transportation crews, the factories, and they will help you.
Yeah, and we're going to jump into all that at the end as well. But again, when you're new at this, you need to ask the drivers to make the drive. You want people to come out and help you with that. So, and we're going to cover some of this stuff in some other portions as well. So here's another thing, right? Access to the site, bridge height restrictions and weight loads. Yeah. I mean, this just sucks. I mean, if you see.
I know. For those of you who are just listening and don't see the visuals right now, I mean, what are we looking at here? This is a bad day.
Well, it is a bad day. So on that left picture, you actually have a modular unit that was being delivered, a section of a home, and it got stuck under a bridge. It was too high. Somebody didn't check the underpass once they got off the highway, and this is what you have.
Yeah.
Now, that's just not a good place to go. However, let some air out of those tires, you might be able to squeak it through, just in case it ever happens to you. It's never happened to me, but if it does, I've heard. So, I mean, and then the picture on the right, Jennifer, is bridges. You have to understand the mathematics behind this. Now, the manufacturers and the engineering are going to help you with all these things. They're truly going to help you with all these things. But again, a lot of the manufacturers want you to do the route for them from the highway.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is where, you know, as you're doing this, take lots of pictures, take lots of video. We'll get into that later as well. But with these bridges and these overpasses, we ran into this last week when we were on site as well. There was a culvert underneath the bridge. And we really need to be careful because maybe 1 module, 2 modules, but when you're talking 50, 60, 100 modules going over that bridge, now you really need to double check your math.
Yeah, for sure. You definitely have to check your math. I mean, this is obviously a really bad case scenario here, but you can see that complete bridge collapsed underneath the house. Now, that's kind of to make a point, this picture, but you could just be going over culverts, you know, which is corrugated steel underneath some dirt, getting back to a lot. You need to make sure that the weight loads can handle that. You know, if it's small enough, I always say, just like the roads, you know, the road workers do, get a big piece of steel, plop it down over top of it to distribute that weight load. It'll help you if you're unsure. And it's a very inexpensive thing to have to do, but you do not want it collapsing. That's a bad day right there.
Absolutely.
That's a very bad day. So moving in, this is where we're going to try something new. So access to the site. Again, we are watching everything visually with our eyes. We're looking at everything visually. This is the job site we were at last week. It's beautiful, right? So in terms of some of the things we saw walking down the road, Jen, why don't we just give a brief overview, and then we'll see if we can play the video, and hopefully I can make the sound happen.
Right. So with this, you have to remember these are volumetric modules. You know, it's not just eye level that you need to be looking at. You need to be looking at 20 feet above you as well, just to make sure that distance is clear. Because what we noticed, you know, during our walk, and this wasn't a short walk, so
it was not.
You know, you'll see how out of shape we both. Well, me, not you. But anyway, you need to look at the whole opening. You need to look for leaning trees, leaning telephone poles, overhead wires.
Walk. Get out and walk the access and choke points. And here, let's see if we can make this happen. I'm going to mute myself so I can try and play it out of another All right. Whoa. So we're trying to play this, trying to get the audio to play through and the video clearly. It's not working. Thanks, Mark. And we're trying too many new things. I think we gotta quit and give up here. I'm gonna play the video through and we're gonna talk about what's happening. So this is a choke point currently that we're looking at. So what we're getting ready to do is we're talking about the telephone pole on the right and the tree behind Jennifer on the left. And we're going to start measuring across there. Now, that at this particular point, we could get through here without very much issue whatsoever. That was 20 feet. But there's some other concerns that you have to be aware of because these modules are long. And that starts turning down a hill right there.
Right.
And that is definitely one of the areas that you really got to pay attention to. And you have to understand the length of what the modules are and how much of a turning radius one needs. And we'll show that in another video. Doesn't require sound moving forward. But there are some important things to take a look at. I don't know if you can see right behind Jennifer, and I know it's really hard. There's a big leaning tree that comes into the road, right? These are volumetric. These are big, big modules. So as they're coming in there, as you'll see in some other videos, you got to know the volumetric
measurements and dimensions,
and,
right? Really look up. This is not just what you see at eye level. You really need to think about that truck driver in that cab and what that person is seeing with these very high modules behind them. So, like Dave was saying, the road did start to turn down below. The grade changed. There was a turn in the road, and this is where you may say to yourself, "Okay, I can't do 60-foot length, but maybe I could do 50 or 40 or something of that nature." So it's not impossible. You just have to be very mindful of all your options and opportunities.
Yeah, you have to get out and measure. Walk and measure everything once you get off the main roads.
Yeah, the other thing that we noticed was that there were sheer drop-offs on certain points of this road as well, where even though it's all overgrown and it looks nice and lush and it looks like the land is level, when you peek over the edge, it was a straight drop-off. So you need to make sure that road is shored up and really can sustain the transport.
Yeah, for sure. And even where those telephone poles in the trees are, you can see that the berm rises on both sides. So getting deep into this site right here, I mean, this road wasn't the same width the entire way down.
Right.
So let's keep walking through.
Sure.
All right. So again, we'll play this video, and sorry for the whitewash. It was hot that day. And bright that day. So what we're doing here is at the bottom, there is a culvert and a bridge that we're walking to, and the video clears up a little bit here in a second. But what's also there is the guardrails. So I don't know if you guys can see what Jennifer's pointing to right there, but we have a guardrail on that side, and we also have a guardrail on the other side. There's a big drop off over there.
Yeah.
Now, again, this is fairly wide here. The road looks great, but all of a sudden we get down and there's a bridge.
Right.
And what happens at the bridge is fairly interesting because we had all this space. We could definitely get super wide modules in there, 15.9. I always say 16 feet, but 15.9 is the width in most areas. So what's happening here, and we'll switch cameras again, but on this bridge, right, there was actually some metal rails that came out probably 7 to 8 inches on each side. So it took away our space.
Right.
So now we don't have 16 feet anymore. We have 15 feet.
Right.
Now, that's a major issue for us coming down. So if we're not walking this, getting out and measuring, because visually, all right, it looks like you're going to fit. And I do the roller here and I drop it. Jen gives me a hard time, makes fun of me, laughs. All right, I got it. So, and we measure it, but this is a major, major thing you have to be aware of. How are you going to, there it is. Sorry. How are you going to get over that? You're not.
Yeah.
You're not. So what's the solution?
So, I mean, same thing. You need to be a little bit creative, right? We talked about your little tips and tricks of letting some air out of the tires and the steel plates over the bridges. But here you're going to have to be creative as well, whether you have some extra machinery that you bring in to help pull the trailers in. that's an option too. So as you're going through the site, you want to say to yourself, okay, maybe the truck pulling this trailer can't get me to where I'm going,
Right.
but maybe with the help of a bulldozer, we could get here, or doing something else.
Well, you can definitely get there, but getting across that bridge, a bulldozer is not going to help you, right? You can try and lift with the front loaders on both sides, but that's a dangerous game. There's two ways on a bridge like this, in my humble opinion. The first way is you can set the crane up and lift it over and let it rehook back up to the truck.
Right.
Expensive, right? Or in this case, there was another route that we found out.
That's exactly right.
We were able to have another route. And in a job like this in an urban area, sometimes you can cut in your own route.
Yeah, so that is a really terrific point.
Yep.
We did only walk over here, but later at this point in time, but at a different point in the day, we did go elsewhere. We hoofed it and took some more measurements and looked around, and that's exactly right. We have the luxury of a super big site
On this one, yeah.
On this job, but the same thing, like in a lot of the beach communities that we work in as well, going back to residential for a minute, there's access to the lots from behind the lot, believe it or not.
Yeah.
In some of the communities, the densely populated communities that we work in. So again, be creative, ask questions, talk to people who have done this before and who are building in your area, because there may be another way.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Don't give up on the first try. That's the key. All right. So moving on, right? Modular access to the site. This is a good video that's going to show you how tight it gets. Now, this is probably about a 45-foot module, maybe 50-foot module on the back of this truck that's being pulled in. This is the normal road. You got a farm fence over on the left-hand side there. Look how tight this is coming in. And this is to paint the picture of trying to understand.
Yeah, let's put it up there so they can see it.
Yeah. Dang, too many
but
controllers.
Again, I know, but we're showing you some examples of things you don't want to happen so that you can keep your eyes open for the opportunities that will work. So this is an example of what we want to be on the lookout for.
Yeah, it really is. And thanks everybody for being patient as we try and work through a presentation through this, because it gets a little tricky with all the computers and trying to do everything. But you can see on this module, look how long it is. This is a big section of a home. That truck is having a really tough time making that turn. If you look on that back left, they're right up against the farmer's fence over there. So again, this is the luxury of being on a site that's in an urban area. We're going to have some photos of sites that are not in urban areas that we've done as well. But you can just see just by watching that. Yeah, you can go out there and measure lengthwise, but you better understand the full volumetric size of this, because it really plays a part in it. Now, Jen, if I got stuck on that corner, what could I do?
So this is where you do want the equipment, right? Where you may want a bulldozer or something else that can help you. Maybe just give it a little tug or a little push.
Well, yeah, if you use a front loader, definitely want a wheeled vehicle on the road, right? But a front loader, a lot of times these units are pretty stiff. You can use a front loader with some forks on it, get underneath and move it over just enough to get it through. You're not wanting to lift this thing way up in the air and do it, but there are tricks to the trade to this. Now, if you're unsure of how this all works, this is where you call your manufacturing partner and you say, listen, I don't know what deliveries you have out this way. I really need your trucks to drive into this site. I need a driver to tell me, hey, can we make this? Because they do it all the time. They'll know what they can fit in and fit out of.
Right.
So that's a good thing. And set crews and the crane company.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's funny. Once you start looking, there are so many set crews out there and there are so many crane companies out there, but this is where you really want to hire the best and go with referrals. Yep,
absolutely. All right. Access to the site. Sorry, the picture's blurry. It's the best one I could get, right? Elevation changes, grade changing. Remember how long these units are, right? If we go back to this one, look how long that unit is. So if you have the front of the truck going down a hill, and that thing's that long, you can see on this photo here that the back of the tires are up in the air.
Yeah, this is what you really need to be on the lookout for. And when you're driving this in your regular vehicle, your regular,
you don't notice it as much.
It doesn't become apparent, but the minute you add that extra length, those trailers,
Makes a big difference, a very big difference, you know. And I can tell you now, the factories do not like their trailers or transportation companies trailers being dragged across the concrete to get in. Now, listen, you're there, you're stuck, you got to do what you got to do to get through the job. But this is a prime example to really pay attention. So this is off the road. Same thing happens when you get off onto the job site or in a city, urban area, right? If you're in San Francisco, this is a problem all day long. If you're in Pittsburgh, this could be a problem for you all day long. So definitely things you want to keep an eye out for.
Yeah, and this is where that alternate route could be the easiest answer. So just take another drive.
For sure. Okay. Now I know this one is always a good one. So this is in an urban area. This is right outside of New York City, a job that we did quite a few years ago. Look at all those telephone and power lines and wires. I'll never forget the factory rep. That was Haven Homes back then. They were still around. And Paul Alvigi, I think was his name, looked at me and said, "You've lost your mind." I said, "No, we're going to do this. We can do this." So, but it is a major issue and it can be a major expense.
Yeah.
We were in it, I think, for almost $60,000, $70,000 to drop wires because the customer wanted the product so bad. They wanted it. They were willing to pay.
Right.
They were willing to pay to get a better product to have those wires drop. Now, urban environment, some things that came out of this.
Yeah. So this is where planning and process really will become super important to what you're doing, because what we had to do here is really look around and see who were the neighbors. Were there any healthcare facilities? Who would be impacted by that power being cut, those lines being dropped? We had to really canvass the neighborhood and just make sure that we didn't bump into any issues. And eventually we did discover that there was a daycare that we had to set up temporary power for.
They wouldn't let us disconnect because they had some kids in there were handicapped. They needed respirators, things that they were, special needs. So we had to actually set them up on a generator for the entire day. And we did get this set. This was 8 modules. I don't know if you guys can see that, but above where it says Dave Cooper on the slide deck there, that little space is where we slipped those into.
Right.
Now, with this home, this house was 50 feet in depth. Clearly, we couldn't do 50 feet here. You can see the amount of wires from the last slide here to this slide here that were removed from the right side of the street and going over to all those homes. They were all rerouted, which is something that can be done in an urban environment. But what we did is we made these 20-some foot modules each in length. So we had actually 2 mate lines on each floor.
Right. But the project came together amazing. And what you're not seeing in these pictures either is a very steep grade. This was, again, outside of New York City, a very steep hill that this was coming in on, a very tight
it was very, very
neighborhood.
tight.
And the finished product was amazing. Everybody worked together and learned a lot on this job.
Yeah, for sure. And when you're digging on a job like this and you're only 2-3 feet apart from each unit, remember, you can underpin somebody's foundation. So we had to do a lot of igniting. We had to do quite a few things on this job. So utility wires are a big thing. You need to pay attention to it. You need to understand the cost to move it. It's always better if you're at a job site where the utility wires are maybe on the other side of the road.
Right.
For sure. All right. So some of the things to note, Jen. Maximum truck length plus maximum carrier, right? Length and width plus the hitch. A lot of people, when you're adding this stuff up, modular manufacturers have short carriers. They have long carriers. You have to understand what you're dealing with. You can request short carriers when you have a job site like we just showed you, where it's very tight to get in and out of. So that is definitely one thing to pay attention to.
Right. So when you're measuring, right, when you're looking at that volumetric turning radius, you have to think not only how long is my module, but how long is my trailer, the hitch, and the truck. You have to add all of those numbers together. And even with your modules, let's say that you determine that you only want 40 length modules, 40 foot long. And you request that size carrier from the factory, there have been times where the factory substitutes a different size carrier. And all of a sudden you have a 50-foot carrier on your lot and you only plan for the 40-foot.
That's right. That's right.
So these are some things to be on the lookout for, and ask questions and really make sure that everybody's clear on what you need.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a good point. So that extra 2 or 3 feet in a module delivery can make or break you. You really need to understand this stuff.
Absolutely.
Especially when it's commercial work. All right, that one. All right, traffic control, police security. Other things you got to pay attention to. Make sure that, and especially a job like that we just showed, we had to have police escorts on both sides, blocking off traffic and controlling traffic, keeping people from walking in. Safety.
Absolutely. Sometimes you'll have to close the roads completely. Sometimes you just need some assistance in directing traffic. It just depends on your setting.
Absolutely. So in crane size, you have to think about the crane size. So where's the crane setting up in regards to all the modular units, right? So on this is a single family structure. The closer you can get the crane to the actual foundation, the smaller the crane you need, unless it's a long sprawling project. But in this particular case, that's probably, I can't tell, but it's probably only a 90-ton crane or less. Not a big crane, don't need a whole lot. It's a small house, but again, the closer you can be set up, the better. Now, during this whole process, you got to think about staging.
Right.
Where are the modules? Where are all 4 of those pieces sitting so you can get this set up and staged properly?
Exactly. And also, what type of foundation is being used here? Because that will also determine how close you can get to the home. If this is a precast concrete foundation, superior walls, you cannot get as close to the home as you can for a poured concrete foundation.
Not at all. Not at all. And it's the same thing. So on this site, this was a job we did for Mod Logic and Axis Construction. We were down there videoing not too long ago. This is a much larger crane. I know it's harder to see in this, but you can see the size. This is 7,000 square foot of 1-story set. Right. And what was important here, that crane actually moved twice.
So that's a really good point, Dave, because if you use that bigger crane that has that longer reach, and you save time, it's more efficient. You don't have to set up and break down multiple times. Sometimes you might say the bigger crane is the better deal. Depending on the project, I would agree with that. It just depends on the project, right? So if you can't get close enough to the single family, let's say you're using Superior Walls foundation and you got to leave it exposed on the, the dirt on the outside and not backfill, then you can find yourself where you need to have a larger crane. In a case like this, it was very well thought out. That crane set the first 8 modules that first day. Mm-hmm. And then they set the other 8 the next day. So at the end of the first day, when everybody was done working, that crane shifted over for the boom and the reach. Right. Now with commercial, again, versus residential, these are 40 to 70,000 pounds each. Mm-hmm. Residential is 15 to 30,000 on general each module. So the crane sizes are different. But you definitely need to understand what it is you're doing. If you're doing a big structure like a hotel and you need 44 modules, where are you putting them? Yeah. That's the thing. You got to think this stuff through. Yeah. Where's some good places that you can stage, Jennifer? So, right now near us, schools are a very good option. Yeah, use schools right now. They have plenty of parking available. Yeah, but where we've had success during the week, again, it depends on the season. Like if you're in a seasonal area, and it also depends on the day of the week. But typically, churches are a really good opportunity to use their parking lots. Churches definitely. Recreational areas that may only be open on the weekends, for example. Yep. Beach parking lots, if it's off season, that's another opportunity. Again, commuter parking lots, depending on the day of the week. So just be creative. You want something close. And if you are staging your modules, you have to think about security. Is this a secure location? Right. Do I need anybody to stay with the modules overnight? What type of protection do we need here? So those are things to consider as well. Absolutely. Okay, so on location, we're going to fly through some of these things, but they are important to note. So if you're looking at this because you're trying to learn, this will all live on YouTube. So please check us out. We're going to get to comments and talking to everybody here in a second. But again, let's just on location, you want to evaluate the views. This is another opportunity to look at the next step. What are we going to build here? How can we build? Where's the driveway, garage access best located if you are a design build firm? Right? If you're the architect for a large project, again, same thing. You're looking at all these. While you're on site, was there an old structure there? Was there wells there? Was there septic fields? Try to know that. You don't want to drive these trucks over an old abandoned septic. Yeah. And so these are some lessons that we've heard people learn the hard way, right? Yep. Where, again, going back to some projects we've worked on, the land was abandoned and didn't know that there was a pre-existing structure there. Whoever had torn it down just literally dug a hole and left the old house there. And so when we went to dig the foundation, discovered an old home buried in the ground. So these are things you need to look out for.
Right. And you got to get rid of all that stuff.
Yeah.
Because that's what they used to do, is they used to bury their garbage. And that happens even when you think you're in the middle of nowhere.
Right. We've seen people burying boats. We've seen crazy things happen underneath the land. You don't know what you can't see, right? So while you're on location, be on the lookout for that. Test holes, septic fields, underground rivers. We were in Pittsburgh, right, with Blockhouse Residential.
Yep. Oh, yeah. They had an underground river running that they had to deal with all that water when they dug down.
Yeah. So these are things that happen. So when you are on location, you're on the lookout for these things. And this is where the engineers and environmental will help you as well. You need to think about coastal proximity. And another thing in terms of permitting and regulations, we have to be on the lookout for trees, protected trees.
Trees. You know, we have tree wardens in some areas, especially when you get in urban environments like we are, where we're building in cities or in the suburbs of cities. There are actual tree wardens, and you have to get their permission and sign-offs to remove trees, even if you think they're on your property.
Right, right.
So these are all big things. There's a lot of little check marks that we got to go through, right?
Yeah. So, and again, thinking about that, remember we had to put in a plaque for honoring the trees.
Oh, yeah. Because one tree was a famous poet sat underneath it and wrote a poem.
William Wordsworth.
Yeah, from Rutherford, New Jersey. I remember that. Yes, we did.
Yeah.
We said, well, we're taking down your tree, but we'll do a plaque.
Right.
So
we had to honor that.
You never know.
And so, coastal area management, coastal exposure, that's something else you need to be on the lookout for. So again,
where you're at, for sure.
Yeah, zoning and all the different regulations. As you're on the site, you're not just looking for access points and staging and where the crane is going. You're also thinking to yourself, who do I need approval from to build here, essentially?
Absolutely. I agree. I mean, there's a lot. So we're covering as much of it as we can. All right. Things to determine. Jen just covered it. Pre-existing structures, previous tear downs, excavation, retaining walls. Do you need a bulldozer, or for a crane or the carriers to get them in? If it's muddy, if it rains, these things sink. Think of those things. You got to be prepared for the staging day, right? And we talked about offsite staging. So, all right. Capture helpful information.
Right. So, obviously this is where, while you're there, you are going to have to communicate all of this information to the different members of your team.
Yeah.
So, create a form, write it down, or do what Dave prefers to do, which is what? Video
and photos for everybody.
Lots of photos, definitely lots of photos. But is it a small lot? How long is the driveway? Are there any steep areas? Power lines, utility poles. You do want to be on the lookout for the utility poles also, because it will help you determine where power is coming into the house. So as you're working with the engineers, as you're working with that site plan and you're thinking about how am I getting power here, that's something that you want to make note of as you're out there on location.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that leads us to, listen,